Great. Thank you, everyone. Again, if you're just hopping on, just in the chat, your name, your location, and then the name of your farm or the organization you work with or the entity that you work with. Awesome. Nice to see so many people here. Kelly Smith, I don't think I've seen you in 20 years, but if you remember, I was a lonely grad student at the University of Minnesota Duluth and visited with you a few times back in the day. So nice to see you. All right. A couple folks from our current Farm Beginnings class. Nice to see you all as well. Daily Double. I know there's a Farm Beginnings class meeting tonight as well. So, all right. I think we will jump in. It's 12:03. We'll keep letting folks in, but just wanted to do a quick welcome and say hello to everyone who's joining us. This is our first climate resiliency offering for this winter. Land Stewardship Project and the University of Minnesota have been working together now for the last 3 winters and summers to be working with specialty crop farmers in particular on exploring climate resiliency, looking at trends both in weather and climate, and then also really leaning into how do we make our farms and our communities more resilient in the face of a changing climate. So this is just another continuation of these offerings. It's been really great to tailor these based on what we've been hearing from farmers. So we've been doing a lot of engagement with farmers, both in the off season and the growing season. And this particular topic around water management came out of hearing from a lot of farmers about this being an issue. So thank you all for being here. My name is Nick Olson. I work with the Land Stewardship Project, and I've been doing climate resiliency work for the last 4 years. My partner Joan and I also have a certified organic vegetable farm in Litchfield, Minnesota. And I'm going to pass it over to Natalie for an introduction.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Whittle. I am an extension educator. I work across Minnesota with vegetable crops. And yeah, Nick and I have been working together along with Annalie for a few years on all of this climate work. So it's really exciting that you're here. This is like our launching of the work for this winter. And you'll hear more at the end about some more opportunities, but this is kind of like the easy, like listen in for an hour kind of offering just to like start the conversation. And then throughout the winter, we're going to have some opportunities to dive a lot deeper into climate resilience topics. So we're going to have an in-person event in January in St. Cloud and then a climate cohort as well. And so like Nick said, in the cohorts we've done over the last couple of years, water management has come up as this particularly significant challenge. Both like dealing with not enough water and dealing with too much water and the unpredictability of having to manage for both of those things at the same time. And so one of the takeaways that people who have gone through these cohorts have come up with is like, we really need to be working more with NRCS and conservation programs that exist to support us in establishing some practices to deal with unpredictable precipitation. But there's been a lot of uncertainty about like what programs exist and how do we navigate them. And so 2 of the farmers who went through the cohort in the first year, Jody and Mike Lenz, did a really cool project last summer. Was it 2 summers ago, Mike? Recently. You'll hear a lot more about it from Mike.
Yeah, 2 summers ago now.
Okay, so 2 summers ago, they did a very cool project with Dana Swanson, their local NRCS person. And we thought it was just like a perfect example of how someone could really effectively work with their local NRCS on water management. And so we asked them to come here today to kind of share both of their perspectives on how that project went and how other farmers can also establish successful relationships and have successful projects. So Nick, I'll pass it back to you to introduce the discussion.
Yeah, that sounds good. So wanted to thank Mike and Dana for joining us. I'm just going to give you all a quick agenda check so you know what's coming up. We're going to do a little we pitched this as a forum, so we're going to do a little discussion before we really dive into the case study that Mike and Dana are going to share with us. So we're going to do a little bit of discussion with the folks on the call around water management, talk about some tips, strategies, and things that we've all been using on our farms. And then we're going to dive into the example that Threshing Table used with NRCS. So Mike is going to share some photos with us. We also have a 30-minute video that we'll share out afterwards that y'all can watch, where there's more context from a conversation with Mike and Dana, and then some more footage of Threshing Table Farm. And then we're going to hear from Dana about how NRCS worked with Threshing Table Farm and some other opportunities in which folks can look at water management and other resource management issues on their farms through an NRCS perspective. And then we're going to open it up to question and answer so that those of you in the room that have questions can put those out to either Mike or other farmers in the space, or to Dana from NRCS. And there are a couple other NRCS folks joining us today too. So Dana, you can tap into those folks too if there are additional resources you want to share that they might have as well. So with that, what we wanted to do, since we do have, like Natalie mentioned, we do have a lot of farmers who have been dealing with water management as an issue on their farm. I was on a call 2 days ago, and it was interesting because the whole conversation was about drought, and how folks were really struggling with irrigation needs for their farms. And then someone said, yeah, but wasn't it just a few years ago when all the farmers were trying to figure out how to get the water off of their farms? And it really was. The last 3 seasons, many of us here in Minnesota and Western Wisconsin have experienced drought. And years 4 and 5 prior to that were some of the wettest years on record. And a lot of us were struggling to get crops in the ground, to keep crops out of flooded fields. In fact, the postcard that we've been using and our website picture is Mike's partner, Jody, in a flooded field. And water management has become an issue for a lot of us on our farms. And as Natalie and other folks from Extension have shared with us, these are some of the trends that we are going to be seeing with a changing climate, is whether it's a drought or a lot of very heavy rain events. So what we wanted to do right now is, since there are a lot of us here, and a lot of farmers, based on the chat that we've been seeing, a lot of farmers out there, I think, Annalie, we'll just keep it in the large group so that if folks, we were thinking about maybe small groups, but if folks want to just kind of stay off camera if they need to. So let's just go in the large group. But I was curious if anybody here would be willing to either come off of their muted scenario, or even put in the chat, or both. What are some of the greatest challenges that you feel exist on your farm in terms of water management? So I'll just state that one more time. And on your farm, what are some of the greatest challenges that you feel that you have in terms of water management? You could use the raise your hand function if you want. You could also just come off of mute, and we can also utilize the chat. All 3 of those are okay.
This is being recorded.
I have a thought on this.
Yeah, is this Jess?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
So I'm a first-year farmer renting just a 1/4 acre of land, certified organic, and we use we're hooked up to a well. It's a collaborative farm, so there's 2 other farms besides myself, and
Google.
The big water management issue for me as a first year, like on my own farm, is planning my infrastructure when I don't have permanent land security. that, and I think a lot of new farmers are in that same situation where you're either renting land or you're not in a permanent place where you can stay. So right now at this collaborative farm, I have well access, but I need to leave this farm. So I am looking for, like, IBC totes. I'm just trying to figure out what I can do on another piece of land that I will need to move to. So this whole like land security thing is a big issue for me right now. And I think a lot of beginning farmers are in the same situation.
Yeah, Jess, thanks for sharing that. We've heard that from a lot of beginning farmers, how without secure access to land, it's really hard to invest in infrastructure for one. And we've also found that a lot of folks who are in an annual rent lease situation oftentimes don't even have access to water. The place that they're leasing or renting doesn't have access to water or a good like volume source of water. So I think you're exactly right, Jess. So I'll be curious to see if other folks have similar situations or concerns. The other challenge that you're going to hear probably, Jess, and this will come up later, but it's also then harder to utilize a program like NRCS when you're on rented land. And we can talk more about that a little bit later. A couple things I'll just call out in the chat. Kelly mentioned a low yielding well, so just not a lot of volume coming out of the well. And then just the challenge of managing time when using drip irrigation. And oftentimes drip irrigation and low volume wells go together. And then just the challenge there. And then also Kelly added one more thing of just the trying to build up the ability for his soil to hold more moisture. In this case, using wood chips and the cost and the effort that goes into that. Anyone else challenges with water management for their situations? For those of you just hopping on, we're just doing a share kind of talking about some challenges that we have with water management on our farm or farm operation.
Something that isn't actually a challenge on my farm, but I was just this last year as part of the 100 Farms project, and there were a lot of farmers that had their water tested and their pH was like too high, and so that's like impacting their overall like soil pH. So that's like a challenge that it seems like a lot of folks are dealing with, and like impacts, soil health and like ability to grow in hoop houses and that sort of thing.
Yeah, thanks for lifting that up, Alyssa. Natalie, would you be willing to just expand on that just a bit? On that pH piece?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we did this 100 Farms project this spring, went to 100 farms in Minnesota. And every single person had a pH that was above what would be ideal, and a really high alkalinity as well. So that's maybe not something we're going to go in depth on today, but something that I know like Extension is going to be focusing on. Just like, how do we deal with that? How do we acidify our water? How do we prevent problems, especially in high tunnel environments? It's not as much of a problem in fields, but it can cause a lot of challenges in tunnels.
Natalie, there was a question in the chat that I don't know. I was wondering if you could address. They're wondering, is clay soil and alkaline connected?
We're looking more at the alkalinity of water. So it's like the ability of water to buffer acids. So we won't go into the weeds, but basically just that the pH is high, and then it takes a lot to bring the pH down. Mostly just because of all the minerals left in the soil by the glaciers. We have a lot of stuff in our water and stuff in our soil. Good stuff. Those things are micronutrients often, but it also means some salt problems that we have to deal with and just challenges to get the pH in the right place.
Thanks, Natalie. Any other folks willing to share out any water management challenges that they are facing or they have faced? Yeah, Miss Mel?
Hi, greetings, everyone. I don't know who else does urban farming. I'm in Chicago. But one thing is lead in the sewer systems, and also just having access on time, because there's always a battle when the Department of Sewers or Water Department decides that we can get water permits. So it's just like, you start putting in seedlings, seeding March or so, but we can't have hydrant access till the 1st of March. So the problem is, okay, what are we gonna do? You either hauling in water from at home, hoping that you got a neighbor that'll let you hook up some sprinklers. So that's always a challenge over here. I mean, literally everybody.
Thank you for sharing that. Alyssa, I saw you nodding your head. I know that I've been to your farm situation. I know you have to utilize a hydrant that has a seasonal capacity as well. So I think that that's also a concern for urban farmers in a lot of regions, but thanks for lifting that up for sure. Anyone else?
Maybe I'll propose the next question, and feel free as you're answering this to also bring in some challenges that you're having. But we also wanted to ask folks to share, before we shift to hearing about Mike and Jody's strategy, what strategies you all have been using to deal with some of these water challenges on your farms. I'll just read. Sal wrote in the chat, we're running hundreds of feet of hose from our house well to irrigate the fields. An ag well or drip irrigation with enough water pressure would be a huge help. Yeah, that's a really, really common problem. And Kelly, I think you managed labor earlier, but just, yeah, having enough hoses, enough infrastructure so that you're not getting up at 2 in the morning to move your hoses around. That's all. It's all related. Kelly shared a solution here in the chat, just related to getting wood chips to help retain soil moisture as a strategy for dealing with unpredictable water levels. Any other challenges or strategies? Oh, sorry, Dick.
No, I was just going to say, I know that we've learned from a lot of other farmers, some who are on this call. We've utilized a little more landscape fabric in our vegetable production over the last couple of years to retain, and weed suppression is one, but also just to retain moisture. And we have found that the landscape fabric not only allows moisture to enter if we do get rain, but when we are drip irrigating underneath that it does tend, in our case, to hold the moisture a lot longer than when we're drip irrigating or overhead irrigating bare soil. All right. If you have any other ones that you want to throw in the chat, please feel free to do so. We'll also have some discussion time at the end, but I think what we'll do is I think we're gonna roll it over to Mike at Threshing Table Farm, who is here to join us. Mike, I will just say we put together a couple pictures from the video that I shared with you, and then you shared an additional photo. We have 2 slides with those. So whenever you want those up, just let us know and we'll cue that up onto the screen. And then we also have the 30-second video of the overhead drone footage of your water operation going. So whenever you need us to cue those up, just let us know and we will do that. But I'm going to turn it over to Mike at Threshing Table Farm, who's going to share a little bit about Threshing Table Farm and then talk about this water project that they did with their local NRCS. So Mike, thanks for joining us, and I'm going to pass it to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. Hi, I'm Mike Lenz, Threshing Table Farm. My wife and I have farmed here 16 years now. We have very sandy soil. We started a discussion with Dana at NRCS. I can't remember how many years ago now, but it's been a process. But we started talking about cover cropping and then a pollinator habitat, and it worked into a situation where NRCS came on site and did an evaluation, and we wanted to do cover cropping, we wanted to do these other things, but we had a resource concern, which was our well was not pumping enough water. And I had developed a system, and a hydrologist came in and kind of laughed at me after I explained my theory of I just downsized the pipes to create pressure. And he says, you do what everybody else did. You should just have large pipes, and we used lay flat at the time, and your pressure is created at your nozzle. So that said, NRCS identified the resource concern, which was the well was not pumping enough water, and that our irrigation system needed to be improved so that we could effectively do cover cropping and grow our vegetables, and then also put water on our pollinator habitat. Nick, if you can, just kind of prompt me along on if I stray. So that said, we applied for a well upgrade and an irrigation system upgrade, along with pollinator habitat, a cover cropping plan, and a water management plan. This was all funded, and we did the project not last summer, but the summer prior, which we went from a 3/4 horse well pump submersible to a 2.5 horsepower well pump. We upgraded our line system from lay flat 2-inch hose to an HDPE. It's black hard pipe that was buried out, and it was a 3-inch diameter, so we had more volume in our system, with risers at each of our management units or fields. Excuse me. Our fields are like 53 feet wide by 330 feet long. And I guess, Nick, if you wanted to show the short video right now.
That sounds great. Mike, while we get the video up, can you just back up real quick and just tell us the scale of your operation, and maybe just talk real quickly about how your water needs changed as you scaled up, and then we'll get the video queued up.
Yes. So the system, I mean, we started with 25 members. We're currently running about 300 members or shares out on 7.5 acres of production land, and then about 2.5 acres of cover on any given time. So our system was developed one way, and then as we got to scale, where we've been now for the last 5 years, it wasn't adequate enough. We were able to water 1/2 of one management unit, so 53 feet by 150 or so feet, and now we water 2 full management units, which are 53 feet by 330 feet, thereabouts. And it is life-changing. And you'll hear me say that quite often in this, but so what we were doing to what we are doing is similar, but it's all upgraded and it takes time. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, okay. Annalee, you want to roll the video?
Yep.
2 management units that are 53 feet wide, 330 feet long, all being watered at the same time. This is our fall lettuce, Brussels sprouts, kale, spinach, more lettuce, broccoli. So this is kind of our ending stuff. This is our pepper field.
Yeah, and
So-
Annalee, maybe Mike, if you
Go
want to talk
ahead.
a little more, otherwise I thought we could show some of the pictures too of the specific parts of this, if you want to do that next.
Yeah, go ahead, put the pictures up and I can talk to some things in the video also. But we use hard set aluminum pipes that you see in there, 30 feet long with a 24-inch tall riser on that system, to get us what we to get the coverage that we're looking for. So the top left picture is just the irrigation box that we started with. And we've worked with Andrew, if they ever do this again, to change to a little bit bigger box. It's on the right-hand side pictures. The white tube is a drain out. So at my lowest point in my property where the water pipe runs, there is a drain out for winter drainage. The box in the lower right-hand corner, and I can only see 4 pictures, is the actual riser with a shutoff valve, and then we use quick disconnects on that.
So Mike, I have other pictures on the next slide. Do you want me to go to the next slide?
You sure can.
Okay. Maybe, there we go.
So the picture in the upper right-hand corner is the HDPE pipe that we used that's buried. The picture up in the upper left-hand corner is our irrigation cart that shows our risers, and then we use Roberts pipes and heads, which is a loop and latch or loop and hook system. And then if you look at the nozzle on there, those are Synerger, they're plastic nozzles. They're about $12. And the heads, the nozzle is that little green piece on there. And those are interchangeable so that you can upsize or downsize your diameter to create your pressure in your system. Very easy to change, easy to clean out. I like them for cost and ease of use. Then in the lower right-hand corner is kind of our old system. We still use this a little bit, I use it in our winter squash where I don't have to move it around anymore. But blue lay flat with homemade built risers and the Synerger tops, all with quick disconnects so that we can unplug and plug them back in. And then the lower left-hand corner is a new style for me. Synerger head. It has two openings on it, one smaller than the other, because what I was ending up with the upper head is I'd get a halo where the water inside, there'd be an impact zone out, and then the inside of that halo was not getting enough water. And this newer head seems to be correcting that problem. I'm still working on whether or not I can cover 2 full management units with that head on it. But the advantage is that I'm getting better water coverage with that head. So
Thank you, Mike. Hey, Mike, would you just be willing, you touched on this a little bit, but you kind of said game changer for the farm. Would you just share a little bit about how this new system, improved your efficiency and also just changed your quality of life?
Oh, the quality of life is, I heard it a couple times, sleeping at night, getting up at 2 o'clock. I don't do that anymore. This system, this upgraded system being life-changing as it was, I went from taking 18 days to water all of our management units. And sometimes, especially in a year like last year, it would have just been survival water. To I can water our whole farm in 4 days. So, and then where I noticed it right away this year was in our potatoes. Before, in survival water mode, we'd get it on when we could. Might not be the right time, might not be as much as we needed, but we watered all our potatoes this year, and I had planned for what it used to be, and that was roughly about 300 to 400 pounds in a 330-foot row, and we're approaching close to 9 to 1,000 pounds in that same space just by having water on it when it needs to be and the quantity that it needs to be. One of the tools that we've got with this is a soil moisture sensor. Along with the water management plan, we monitored the potatoes on a daily basis with this soil monitor to tell me where the water was, and also through the water management spreadsheet, which was very close in their numbers, so I could see what was my field was at and what the data was telling me it was at, and we were able to apply the water when it needed it or ahead of when it would need it. And just being able to water that amount in that short amount of time has allowed me to sleep at night. I can turn it on at night and get up in the morning and switch it over to a different field. And then with the system, I can see how many gallons of water we put out and math that out to how many inches of water got applied to that field. Plus I use the little rain gauges out there also to just verify my numbers. So.
Thank you, Mike. Super helpful. Anything you want to add? We'll do, let's see, I'm trying to decide, Natalie, should we do some Q&A on this specific system right now or should we hop over to Dana first and then come back to Q&A?
Let's talk to Dana first and
Okay,
then
that sounds good.
come back.
Okay. So we will have an opportunity to ask both Mike and Dana some questions, but Dana, if you would be willing to just share from an NRCS perspective, the process of working with Mike and Jody at Threshing Table, and then also about just the different resource management opportunities folks have to work with you all at NRCS. So we'll pass it over to Dana. Thanks for joining us, Dana.
Yes, thank you for having me. Yeah, so uh m- Mike and I started working together a couple years ago, like you mentioned. And I'm sorry, what was the first thing you said to talk about?
Whatever works for you. But I just thought talking a little bit about working with Mike and Jody, and then maybe
Yeah.
going into a little more details about some of the things that NRCS has to offer to farmers in terms of water management.
Okay, so yeah,
I
Mike
think it
came
could be
in.
helpful to frame it as like if someone just walked into your office and said, I want a well, like that might not work very well. Like, how did they approach you in a way that worked? And like, how can other farmers think about starting that relationship with their NRCS person?
So Mike actually first came to the office with interest in adding cover crops to his operation to help with soil organic matter, soil quality improvements. And while we were there, he mentioned that he was having problems with his irrigation system. So we called in the like Mike mentioned, the hydraulic engineer to come in and evaluate his system, and turned out that there was a resource concern that we could address. So I think starting the conversation and, you know, telling us what your challenges are and your goals are, help us to determine, you know, where we can help. And so even if program wise, you know, we can't help in that sense, we always have, you know, resources or connections, or we can also offer technical assistance in other ways too. So yeah, when just basically kind of talking about his challenges led us to, you know, determining, you know, how we can help him meet his challenges. And then with the including the pollinator habitat in the application, helped his farm in many ways and helped his application too. So just basically, EQIP is a program to help solve resource concerns. So challenges are what we're there to help with. So yeah, discussing what the specific challenge is what helps us determine how we can help. And then I might drag in Andrew Donovan here. He's the engineer that helped work on Mike's project. He designed the system and is very familiar with our water management resource concerns. Inefficient water is, I think, the one that we were looking at Mike's place, but he would have, you know, more information on that. Andrew, I don't know if you want to jump in at this time and share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I can jump in. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, I wasn't the initial engineer. Like they said, we had our state hydrologist come up and look at Mike's system. But then I kind of came in afterwards and helped out. I'm an engineer out of Altoona. And so what we're looking at when we first go out to evaluate a site is we're looking at potential resource concerns involving either inefficient water use or energy inefficiencies. And so in Mike's situation, we deemed he was using inefficient water. His pump, he had a 3/4 horsepower pump that was pumping about 10 gallons per minute. So he just didn't have the flow that he needed or wanted to get out of his system. And so that's kind of where we came in. And we had an idea that his well could support more. It just needed a larger pump in there. And so we ended up, he got a well driller out there to look at his well and saw that it could produce more water. And then yeah, we worked with Mike. I worked with Mike and figured out what his management was, and helped him come up with a system that would work well with him and also address our resource concerns that we were hoping to solve. Yeah, that's a little bit about the engineering side of things. Did I cover? Are there any questions or anything?
Andrew or Dana, could I just have you, we're going to open up the Q&A really soon here, but can I just have you expand a little bit? Is this something you've done before with specialty crop farmers? Was this a new first time project? I know from Natalie and I's perspective, we haven't heard of a lot of this type of scenario. So I'm just curious, A, was this a first time for this type of project? And then a follow-up would be, do you have any advice for farmers who might be approaching someone in their local office who hasn't been exposed to something like this before? So if you could just, either of you could just share a little bit about that, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I can take this one, Dana.
Okay.
This was pretty new to us. We see a lot of conventional irrigation, so center pivots, cranberries. I guess cranberries is a little bit of a specialty crop, but we see a lot of corn, soybeans. And so, yeah, this was new. And it was interesting. It was fun to work on just because it was so unique. And I think specialty crops they present their own challenges. You don't have a high capacity well to work with. You're a lot of times are coming off of a house well or something like that. So it was really just evaluating what was out there on Mike's farm and then trying to come up with a solution that was unique to his site. As far as new farmers coming in, looking for a potential system, like Dana said, I think it's really just coming to us with your issues, kind of what your goals are, what you're looking to get out of it, and then we can kind of work from there. Just come out on site, make a site visit, and evaluate what you have, and see if one of our programs would work there. Otherwise, just try and provide you with some technical assistance if all else fails.
And I guess I have one follow-up question too. I think there's been a lot of confusion over the last few years about the well program and like how NRCS supports wells. And I'm wondering, this was kind of a unique situation where you were stacking practices. Like you had the pollinator habitat, and then you had this water resource concern. And was that kind of, whose idea was that? Was that like a workaround to make the well program work? Or is there some like general guidance that would apply to specialty crop farmers about the well program?
I would have to get back to you on a new well. I personally haven't worked with that. The workaround with this one was it actually wasn't, we didn't use our well program. We used our pumping plant because the well itself wasn't the issue. It was much more getting the water from the well to the field. And so it was a pump replacement is kind of how we worked with that. But Dana, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit. So in regards to like the stacking practices and wells, basically it will probably be like, first of all, state dependent, and then more locally county or local work group dependent. In our specific county at the time, and things change from year to year. So it's not something that there's like a list of things. It's more like, how is this year's program panning out? What do you have that fits into the goals of this year's program? In our state and in our county, in our area, we've been using prioritization tools to prioritize, because we get a lot of applications and it's hard to work on all that we get every year, these prioritization tools were helping us to determine which applications to work on first, basically. And in the year that Mike applied, converting 10% of cropland to pollinator habitat was one of those priorities. So that was something that helped his application, and it was something actually my coworker Luke and I had, you know, kind of known in the back of our mind when we were there. And like, well, you've got honeybees, you've got vegetables that need pollinated, like a pollinator habitat would benefit your operation, and it would meet NRCS's goals by converting cropland to pollinator habitat. So it's just kind of like everything magically fell together at his place. And when it comes to irrigation, an important consideration is program eligibility. There's, you know, some nuances with that, but with irrigation, the big thing is you have to have already been irrigating for 2 out of the last 5 years. So we are looking at improving existing systems, not starting new systems. But with wells, I haven't worked with wells in irrigation other than with Mike, but I also sometimes work with grazing, and the only way we can help with a new well is if the existing well is not sufficient, it can't pump water to where it needs to go, or if they don't have one, you know. So it's kind of what I know about the wells currently. So it really comes down to your location, the priorities of where you are, and then what your existing infrastructure and challenges are, so that we can solve a resource concern.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you for clarifying that.
You're
So you
welcome.
shouldn't print out a specific program and say, this is what I want. You should just
Right.
start with
Yeah.
your goal, start with concerns, and go from there.
Yeah. And then hopefully the agent that you're working with will know like what, you know, who to get in touch with and what the priorities are and how to make it, you know. And sometimes, you know, it funding, like I think Mike mentioned it in the video too, like we were a little surprised that his project got funded. It's just kind of all the stars aligned, and it was really awesome that it worked out. But I have also been working with another vegetable farmer, and his project hasn't gotten funded, you know, and he's been waiting a couple of years. But, you know, sometimes it takes a couple of years for enough funding to be available. So, you know, it's depending on what your timeline is, you know, there's always hope. If you don't get funding in the first year, you can try again. And I really do feel like the technical assistance and the you know, connections and that kind of thing is also valuable too. So, and you never know what will come up. I mean, we're always like, as NRCS employees, we're always you know, adapting to changes every year. So the priorities change and program rules change, it seems, almost yearly. So it's worth sticking around, I guess.
Dina and Andrew, can I just ask one last follow-up question? And then I think we can open it up to the big group. But this was mentioned a couple times, and I think, you know, I've been farming and working with NRCS for quite some time, and it not that it surprised me, but I like to hear about it. Could you just talk a little bit about this technical assistance? So, and maybe like in the terms of water management, because Mike mentioned a few things. So I'm just thinking, like, say this other farmer that you mentioned hasn't got their project funded for the last 2 years. That's really what they want. But at the same time, you're also able to offer some technical assistance that can also help that farmer, even if they're not getting their project funded at the moment. Could you just talk a little bit about, in the context of water management, what are some of the technical services that you might be able to provide specialty crop farmers?
Yeah, it always depends on time, you know, time available of the people in the office. But Andrew, I don't know if you want to mention too, but Andrew was able to put together kind of a rough design for this farmer, and I don't know, Andrew, if you want to, they run calculations, maybe they could tell you like, oh yeah, this is the wrong size pipe. You need this size pipe instead, or something like that. Does that sound correct, Andrew?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we can help out with quick calculations, quick designs that, if he wanted to build it on his own, we could help him out with a potential design that would work. Otherwise, in terms of irrigation water management, we have a program that we use, that's actually put out by University of Wisconsin Extension. They have an irrigation water management spreadsheet that you could go online and use on your own without us, if you were interested, and they have guidelines on how to use that. But yeah, as far as our programs, when we write an irrigation water management plan, we'll use that spreadsheet, but then kind of coach you through it and answer any questions.
Or like suggestions on like the soil moisture probe that Mike mentioned. Andrew, you could probably recommend to someone, yeah, this is the probe that we see that people use and they like it for this reason, or just kind of tips like that, I guess.
Yep, exactly.
Great, thank you. I think that's important for a lot of us to recognize also as we start to work more with our NRCS folks, that in addition to projects, there's also this opportunity for technical assistance. Okay, I think we're going to open it up to question and answer, both for Mike and for Dana and Andrew. And it looks like Dana and Andrew, there's already 2 questions for you in the chat. So I'm just going to read those out loud. And if one of you or both of you would be willing to address those. One was, are irrigation ponds something that NRCS helps plan / fund? And then the second question is, from a beginning farmer who has 0 irrigation, is there any technical assistance to help plan out an initial irrigation system for a beginning farmer? So I'll bounce those 2 questions over to you, and then we'll go to Q&A from everyone.
I don't know about irrigation ponds. Do you, Andrew?
I think I've heard of them out west. I personally haven't heard of or seen them in Wisconsin. That's not to say we couldn't potentially do them. I would just refer to your local NRCS office for help there. And then what was the second question?
About helping a beginning farmer get started in laying out a irrigation system when they have 0 things in place for irrigation currently.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would. The first place I start is the well. I pull up the Wisconsin DNR well report to see what your well is producing, how much water you can get out of it. And then, yeah, then again, I would refer to your local NRCS office to see if they could come out for a site visit. And it's hard to give you a one size fits all, just because every site is so different.
Yeah, I would say you can always ask. It always depends on what their workload is at the moment, and they may not have the time right away because we do have certain like times of the year where we're working on different things and there's certain deadlines we're up against to meet. But get your name into the office. They'll put you on a list for when they do have time to work with you. And I mean, it never hurts to ask. So you just never know what the current local office is currently working on or has time for, or what they can offer. So
I would agree with what Dana said. This was not a instant fix project. This was a couple, I want to say almost 3 years in the works before we got to the point where it was funded. And as far as the timing goes, the state hydrologist just happened to be in the area looking at other farms, and Dana says, can we come out to your farm tomorrow? Yes. Making yourself available when they're available is also critical, you know, to helping this whole process along.
Great. Okay, we're gonna open it up to question and answer for either Mike at Threshing Table or Dana or Andrew. Craig's utilizing the raise hand function, which is totally legit. Thank you, Craig. You can also put your questions in the chat. But yeah, Craig, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'll try to make this brief. The discussion here about well conditions, new or old. Can somebody with experience with county records? So I had this personal experience with my well where a contractor and I were trying to negotiate or trying to figure out what it was because it's older. He mentioned public records. Can someone help me remember what that resource is in our counties or municipalities in which to see these well depths? You know, so the question is if someone can help people with this public directory. And I'm asking for help to remember it for my situation selfishly, but so that's just a conversation starter in terms of public records. I know it's out there. I know I looked at it. So you can go out and see. So I couldn't find records on mine, but if you have a newer well as a neighbor, you can go look at what everybody else's. You can peek at what everybody else's well depth is. So I just don't remember what the name of that public directory resources, but I think that's relevant to us here.
Thanks, Craig. Kelly put in the chat, it's called the County Well Index. And then it looks like Andrew put a link for Wisconsin and Matthew put a link for Minnesota. So hopefully that will answer that question that you had, Craig.
Yeah. And Craig, also, when we were doing ours, I worked directly with not necessarily the well driller, but it was the well pump gentleman in our area. And he pulled up that data on his laptop sitting in my driveway. And we had them come out and do a test pump to see how many gallons per minute that our well was capable of. But that's how we went about ours.
Thank you, everyone, for chiming in with those resources. Other questions?
Kelly put a question in the chat here that was related to something you said, Andrew. How does one tell from the well driller's report if a well is adequate for irrigation? Can you just flag like a couple of the key things that you would look at when you're looking at that initial report?
Sure. Yeah, so on most reports, it'll tell you the depth of water or the depth of the well, the static water level, and then the water level that they're pumping at. And then off to the right, there should be another area that shows how much water they're pumping and for how long. So in Mike's case, I think his well report says they were pumping 10 gallons per minute for 2 hours or something. So it kind of gives you a rough idea of the amount of flow, the amount of water that you are producing out of your well. And then that is kind of how we design an irrigation system based off of that. But it gives you an idea of where you're at. And yeah, I hope that kind of answers it.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Let's see, we're going to keep on with question and answer, but it's been 1 hour. We had scheduled this for an hour and a half, so we're going to keep doing some question and answer, but we also know a lot of folks only have an hour to give. We put together just a short poll with 2 questions, and we'd love it if folks would be willing to answer that quickly. And while that pops up, we can keep on with question and answer. So, Annalie, thanks for launching that up. Looks like people are able to access it and answer it, so thank you. There should be 2 questions on there. While folks are doing this, I just had a question for Dana and Andrew, and I know Matthew also works with NRCS. Dana, you mentioned like there's different times of the year. Is your schedule, when would be a good time for a farmer to come in? Is winter time, like, so I know a lot of farmers have a little downtime right now. Would now be a good time of year to come into the office and have some of these conversations? I'm curious how that relates to your particular schedule, since this tends to be a better time for farmers.
I can't speak to Minnesota NRCS because I don't know what their timelines are, but I can tell you for Wisconsin, usually we have our EQIP, which is the program that Mike did his project through. Our EQIP batching date is usually in November. So any application that we've gotten up until November, whatever the date is, that year, we look at working on for the next year so like the November 17th, I think, was the cutoff for this year. So now we're looking at any application we had up until November 17th, we're looking at for 2024 funding. And so usually in the fall, we're also working on a different program we have called CSP. So we're kind of juggling the 2. And then as winter sets in, we're really focusing on those applications that we had gotten up until that batching date cutoff. So anyone new coming in will probably be looking at in the spring or the summer, because we'll be focusing on the applications that we had already gotten up until that point. So, I'd say if you come during the winter brand new, you'll probably be looking at working with us more in the spring of the following year or the summer, because we'll be looking at the applications we got up until that point, if that makes sense. So if you come in the winter, probably be, we can do some initial conversations or whatever, but probably be focusing more on the applications we had gotten prior to that. And then, so it is a good time to start the conversation in the winter, because then in the spring, when you want to be out doing site visits and stuff, you have a list of people that you can catch up with and that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know, it's kind of not a great answer to the question, but yes and no, I guess.
No, thank you for that.
Later winter probably is better, because with our deadlines, we're focusing on getting projects ready to be considered, so like probably February and March is better than December and January. So.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna put Matt on the spot. So Minnesota has a couple of exciting new urban NRCS positions, and I know we have some urban farmers on the call. So Matt, can you just really briefly say what that is and what kind of support you can provide, and maybe how that's different from how NRCS has worked in the past?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Lundberg. I'm an urban soil conservationist in Farmington. So I've been here about 2 years. More recently, they reclassed all the metro county staff as urban staff, which doesn't really change my job all that much. I still work with just as many, urban producers as I have in the past, but there are 2 positions that are more specifically urban kind of conservationists that are the go-to contacts, especially for folks who are living maybe in Ramsey or Hennepin County. So those positions are generally more tailored to doing those site visits and kind of being the first contact to understand kind of the goals, project goals, any interests, where priorities might line up between someone who's interested in the programs and NRCS. I think that's kind of a real general overview. like I said, there's one position that's based in Northfield right now in Rice County, and one that's based in St. Paul here. And I believe there'll be a new person starting in St. Paul probably around maybe January or February. So that's just kind of a general overview. If anyone has specific questions, maybe I can answer those. I'm here hoping to learn a little bit as well about how Dana had that micro irrigation kind of contract set up. Dana, I'll probably be contacting you at some point here soon. But yeah, thanks everybody.
Hey, thanks, Matt, for sharing that. Because it came up at the beginning with some questions, just curious, do you have any examples? If you don't, that's fine, but do you have any examples of where you've worked creatively with an urban farmer on a water management resource issue? We heard from a couple folks of just like not having access or whatever that might be. I'm just curious, do you have any examples of a situation where that's something y'all have worked on?
Yeah, we do have we have quite a few folks, maybe at least 4 people right now around my area that have reached out with varying degrees of I need a new well, I need a new pump, similar to how this contract was set up, upgrading in horsepower, and they're pretty new to us still. So like I said, we're learning. Dana already mentioned it can depend on your state, county, area. So even the way that like we've been working with some of our hydrologists or engineers are maybe a little different from how they're dealing with it on the north side of the metro. So I would still say specifically here in Farmington, we're learning and we're trying to keep that process going. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today. Any other questions from the group? All right, 10 awkward silent seconds on Zoom seems a lot longer than that, but I counted to 10, so I think it's fair to say that we don't have any additional questions. Annalie, would you be willing to share the last slide of just upcoming events that we've got coming up? And then we'll give a thanks out. So before we close out, as Natalie and I mentioned, Land Stewardship Project and Extension have been working together on a variety of climate resiliency offerings for farmers. And we have 3 more things coming up here this winter. This is kind of our kickoff, like Natalie said, kind of the passive hop on Zoom. But we have a climate resiliency training. It's just a couple hours to dive in a little more in depth specifically around climate resiliency as a general practice on your farm. We'll be looking at some weather and climate trends. And then we'll also be hearing from 2 farmers who have implemented climate resiliency plans on their farm. So that's going to be January 16th. That's actually in person in St. Cloud from 12 to 2:30. We'll be serving free lunch. So if you're in proximity to St. Cloud and you want to join us, we'd love to have you. For those of you that want to go a little more in depth, I know I recognize a few people on this call who went through one of our last 2 climate cohorts. But we're going to be launching our 3rd climate resiliency cohort. And that's an opportunity for specialty crop growers to take part in a 3-part session, 2 of which are on Zoom and 1 is in person, to really look in depth at their farm and the correlation to weather-related risk in a changing climate, and to come up with adaptation strategies for their farm and an implementation plan for that. Like I mentioned before, we've had multiple farmers, Mike and Jody included, who were part of that. And it's really made some good impacts on local farms in terms of being more resilient. It's also really nice to be in a group with other people who are thinking similarly to you to do some of that sharing as well. So that's an opportunity as well. That cohort is also free. And then we're gonna have a climate gathering on the 29th of February at Camp St. Croix in Hudson to bring a bunch of farmers together to talk shop, to share different ideas and strategies we've been using on climate change. And that will be in conjunction with the third cohort. So the third cohort will be a part of that as well. So if that's any of that's of interest to you, Annalie's going to drop the link to all of that registration in the chat. And we'd love to see you at any or all of those events coming up. And then also, just so you know, feel free to reach out to Natalie, myself, Annalie, our great NRCS folks that are on the call. Please feel free to reach out to any of us with questions, comments, or further ideas and thoughts that you might have. So with that, I just want to give a big thank you to Mike and Dana and Andrew hopping on too. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. Thank you for sharing your experience working together and the inspiration that I think we can gain from having these collaborative relationships with our local agencies. And thank you for just taking some time out today to share that. In a follow-up email, we'll also share the video that Mike and Dana put together about this. It has a little more information and goes in a little more depth. I'll send that out in a follow-up email for everyone who participated today. So thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing some of you again very soon. Natalie, did you want to add anything else?
I think just that even if you were here today, it's worth watching the video, especially if you really want to think through like what an irrigation system could look like for your farm. We decided not to screen it just due to bandwidth issues, but it's still worth watching, even if you heard from Mike and Dana today. So.
Hi, Diana. Nice to see you. All right. We are going to close out. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate you being here, and we'll see you soon. Enjoy the sunny afternoon if you've got one.
Thanks, everybody.